Riley Johnson, and I'm going to be talking to you about bowling. Now, I know when you think of science, bowling probably isn't what comes to mind, but it's something I'm really passionate about, and there's actually a lot of science behind it. First off, here's a video of me bowling. Now, you might have noticed that the ball didn't begin to hook right away. It started with the skid, then it began to roll, and then it didn't hook until the end of the lane. This is because of the oil. So lanes are 60 feet long, and most of the oil is at the front of the lane, and then there's oil in the middle of the lane, and then usually the back 20 feet or so is dry, and that's where the ball hooks. This makes sense because where there's more oil, there's going to be less friction, which means less movement from the ball. There are actually many different types of oil patterns that competitive bowlers bowl on. They could be different lengths, different volumes of oil, or just different patterns in general. The point where the lane becomes dry and the ball begins to hook is called the break point. The break point differs on different length oil patterns, so you have to adjust the line you're playing, meaning where you're standing left or right, or where you're aiming at on the lane. There's also many different types of balls. They can have different cover stocks: solid, which has a higher coefficient of friction; pearl, which has a lower coefficient of friction; and hybrid, which is a mix of the two. And they can also have different cores. There's symmetrical, which usually has a smoother motion, and then there's asymmetrical, which usually goes straighter and then snaps in at the end. Now, there's a few other things that determine how much your ball hooks. There's speed, axis tilt, and rev rate. Speed is pretty self-explanatory. Pretty much the faster you throw the ball, the less it's going to hook because it doesn't have as much time to hook. Axis tilt is the angle at which your ball rotates. It's based on the position of your thumb at the release. So if your ball is directly on top when you release it like this, you're going to have no axis tilt and your ball will just roll end over end and it won't hook. If you come around it too far with your thumb, your axis tilt will be too high and it will skid further, reducing the amount of hook. Now, the final thing is rev rate. So rev rate is the actual amount of revolutions your ball does. Rev rate is based on the distance your fingers go from the inside of the ball to the outside of the ball at the release point. So if you're already over here at the release point, it's going to be a lower distance coming around it, versus if you're directly behind it, then it's going to be a greater distance coming around it, increasing your rev rate. And the higher the rev rate, the more your ball is going to hook.